Hello, my name is Peter Nesbitt and this is my colleague Rob.
Hello.
Today we're going to be talking about training the next generation of TEFL teachers. So what's that about? We're going to be giving you some hints and tips on how you can train people to teach English. So this presentation is divided up into a couple of sections. One is the main presentation, and we're the part that we give you hints and tips. And then the second part is on questions and answers. Now, if you want to ask a question, please do so via two channels. So you can do it through YouTube or you can do it through Microsoft Teams. If you're going to do it through YouTube, you've got to subscribe to Oxinity. Now, a bit of advice, please ask your questions throughout the presentation. You don't need to wait till the end. And when we come to the conclusions, we're going to close the questioning, and then you can, by that stage, if any questions you've asked, we're going to go through them then after conclusions. All right, okay. Shall we make a start?
Let's go.
Okay, first things first. Before you're going to think about training someone, you've got to first understand, how do people learn, all right? Now, we're going to look at a specific model of learning, which is called the 70-20-10 model. What this says is that in the workplace, you learn 70% of the time through experience, 20% of the time through observations, and 10% of the time through formal instruction or theory. So that 10% is really small compared to the 70%. Why is that? Well, not only that people learn through training courses, but they're also learning on the job throughout their career. So that's why so much of what you learn is actually through experience. But what can you do to help people through their experience to make sure that they are ready to teach after a training course such as a TEFL course? We're going to look at these individually. Rob's going to talk you through the first part, which is 10%, and that is theory.
The theory part, exactly. So we've got it in 4 different stages here. So the first part is grammar. So obviously it's really, really important that a trainee knows that they exactly what they're going to talk about in a class. Obviously, they're prepared before with the teacher and with each other, but they need to know very, very basic, simple things, maybe like what a noun is or what a verb is, and then right through to more complicated things. I'm thinking active and passive voice, reported speech, phrasal verbs, this type of thing, conditionals. You know, you need to make sure that they're not going to get mixed up between the first conditional or the second conditional. So it's really important that the teacher helps them through the grammar part of the preparation.
That's true. Now, the way that you teach grammar isn't necessarily the way that they're going to be teaching grammar to someone who's learning English, okay? So when you're teaching grammar to a trainee, it's quite analytical. It's maybe a bit like what a linguist might go through. So you're learning things, terms, names, the functions, the form. But actually, when you're teaching, and especially if you're going to be teaching through a communicative approach, it's going to be a lot different. So a lot of it's through conversation and using it in the right context. Okay, what else do we have in theory?
So next part is teacher methods. So as Peter mentioned there, we like to teach in the communicative approach, but there are many different approaches to teaching English. There's not just one. It's just really important that the trainee knows exactly how they're supposed to be teaching in the classroom environment, making sure that they cater to all students' needs.
Right, exactly. And not only there's different ways to teach, but there's also lots of different ways that people learn. And so this might be a part where you might teach them that as well. The next part's lesson planning. So what can we do to help people learn how to create lessons?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's all about just making sure that they're prepared, that they know the material well, whether that's focusing on the grammar or whether it's focusing on a conversation, maybe a topic activity where we're going to have a debate or something like that. They need to know how to use the material.
Yeah, indeed. A tip, a theoretical tip is that if you're going to teach people how to create good lessons, use the PPP method. Briefly, that is, it's where a lesson is broken up into sections. The first P is presentation. All right, okay, I usually get these mixed up, but presentation. Second P is practice, and third P is production. Presentation is where the teacher presents the target language. For example, present simple, they show what it is. The second part is practice. So the teacher, together with the students, they learn together how to use the present simple. They practice it. And the third one is production. So this is the part where the student produces the language, okay? And then the teacher obviously error corrects. Now, if the student can produce a language effectively, then you know that they have acquired that that part of the language. And the idea is that the PPP method gives them a flow of which they start off by like seeing or hearing the language up until right the point where they're producing themselves. And then finally, classroom management. That's the final part.
So classroom management covers everything from how to deal with problems in the classroom, how to avoid problems in the classroom, how to deal with children or teenagers, how to deal with adults, how to deal maybe with a group that has different levels.
Online, in person.
As you say. So how to manage or deal with the situation depending on the class. No two classes are the same, so you need to be prepared for everything.
Exactly. Right, okay, that's the theory. So 10% theory, done. Okay, easy. Next part, observing others. Okay, I mean, this is quite self-explanatory. Before someone can truly learn how to do something, it's helpful if they see it in action first. So what can you do as a TEFL course provider or a trainer? What can you do to help them with their observations? Well, what you can do is you can pair them up with someone. So pair a trainee up with an existing teacher and have them observe their class. And then afterwards, go through them. What did they see? What did they learn? Did they pick up on this? What was different about that? What are the nuances with the different classes? Now, a top tip of ours is provide as much observations as possible, and also lots of different types of observations. So, as we said before, online, in person, groups.
High-level students who are very, very basic and beginner level of English.
Yeah. That's probably the most important, actually, the different levels, because the way that you teach a basic level is completely different than the way you teach an advanced. So that's probably the most important, actually. Lots of observations, and with that, then the student will feel ready that they can do that. Now it's time for them to be able to teach. And so we're on to experience. Okay, so we're going to look at experience in two different ways. Let's assume now that your trainee is teaching, and you are observing them, and you're going to provide them with some kind of assistance. What can you do? Okay, two things. You can help them prepare before the class, and you can give them feedback after they've done the class. Let's look at these two individually. Rob's going to talk to you about how you can help people prepare.
Okay, so the first part is obviously that you need to make sure that the trainee understands the material. So that means that they're comfortable and confident going into the class. They know what they're talking about. They're not going to get grammar terms mixed up. And they're just really comfortable using the system for the students. Yeah,
it's quite self-explanatory. You can't do a good class unless you understand what you're teaching. Don't get your terms mixed up. Be clear with the kind of examples you're giving, definitions you're giving, synonyms as well. They're quite useful. So these are all the things that you can do to help them prepare. And part of it is on you, of course, to help them. But it's the onus is on the trainee to be able to be fully prepared that they understand the material and they know what they're doing. The next part is what we recommend is you can provide simulated training. So this is effectively you've got a trainee, maybe a group of trainees, and rather than have them just go and teach a class themselves, get them to teach the class in a safe environment with their peers and in front of other people. That way they get feedback in a safe way. They don't feel so threatened. Also, the importance here is that if you don't have a paying customer, then if something was horribly wrong, then it's not a disaster for the customer. So obviously the most important thing, as we know in teaching English, is making sure that the student is happy, the person who's learning English. So provide them with simulated training and video them. This is something that is it's maybe not something that everybody likes to do. Obviously, me and Rob don't mind, but some people, especially at the beginning, might be a little bit wary. But I would say that sell the benefits of videoing someone before they go out in the real world. The reason why it's important is because if you see yourself teach on video, you become your own best critic, and you really can self-correct. You may not even need the feedback of other people. You can actually just see it. Yeah,
I think it's actually quite good to put yourself outside and watch from the outside, and you maybe have a different feel as to how the class went, seeing it from a different point of view, a different perspective.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, even if you think about when you record your voice, the first thing people say is, "That's not my voice." So that you really, people don't really have a strong ability to be able to reflect upon their own performance very well. We're not very good at doing it. So you need to be as objective as possible, and that's one way of doing it. All right, Rob's going to talk you through the next part.
Brainstorm. So, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but by brainstorming, we mean coming together as a group and coming up with ideas, whether that's with the other trainees or just the teacher. You know, two brains are better than one. You can think of as many different ways to teach. You can learn different techniques from each other. And again, it's really important before a class.
Yeah, indeed. And then the final part is peer feedback. So, you know, this is really useful. We're going to move on to feedback in a second, but just before we do, it's good to talk about this. Peers can offer valuable insights into how people are learning, and not only that, but by listening to a group of people give each other feedback, they feel that they're getting a broader perspective on how to teach, because they're hearing lots of different types of opinions. They might have thought, oh, this person is giving that person feedback on this. I never would have thought of doing that. I might try that next time. All right, so we've had a look at the different ways that you can help prepare someone. Okay, next we're going to look at what do you do when someone actually is teaching, and how do you give them good feedback. Feedback is really important because that helps them improve for the next time. So the next thing we're going to look at are the different ways that you can give effective feedback, and Rob's going to have a look at the first one.
Okay, so the idea of being positive, okay? Even if you need to give some kind of negative feedback, you can always do it in a constructive way. It's vital to be positive. You don't want to knock the confidence of the trainee. So I think, just being as positive as possible, even when talking about the negative things, is vital.
Yeah, use positive language.
Don't use things like don't.
Or even don't use the word no. Sometimes that's really hard to do. But if you refuse to use certain negative words, it really does help you speak in a more positive way. You're limiting your vocabulary in that sense. So that's being positive. Next one is be objective. Right, this is really important. So in order for someone to accept your feedback as true, the more objective it is, the more likely they are going to do that. And remember, what's the point of giving feedback? The point of giving feedback is that the recipient goes away, accepts, okay, I need to work on some things, I'm going to change this behavior, and they come back and they improve. That's the whole point. So the more objective you are, the more likely they're going to be able to accept it as true and do that. So what can you do in order to be more objective in your feedback? Well, one thing is use objective language. Try not to use subjective language. Avoid maybe things like I think or maybe. And also write things down. So write down what you hear, what you see. Write down maybe a sentence that someone used that was maybe inappropriate for a certain level. And then you repeat that sentence back to the recipient, the trainee, and you say, this is what you said. Well, they can't really argue with that, I guess. So be more objective. Another way of being objective is get multiple sources of feedback. So yourself, and maybe even the students. So if you have the person who's learning English, ask them for feedback. The more people say things that are true, the more likely you accept as being true. Next bit,
suggestions for improvement. So it's always good to ask, first of all, how the trainee felt the class went, you know. They can then get feedback from them, and maybe you agree with them. Maybe there'll be some difference, but then, as Peter mentioned before, that's where if you've taken notes and given examples, then you can use them to give your feedback. Don't just concentrate on negatives. Concentrate on how they can improve going forward. Yeah,
I think that the idea is that you should be not an expert, but you should at least be able to be in a position where you have expertise. So giving a suggestion for improvement is helpful. But yeah, as Rob says, first of all, ask them what would you do differently, and then move on to what you would do differently. Finally, timing. So why is timing important? I'll give you an example. Okay, let's say that you have a trainee who's just taught a class, didn't go very well, they're a bit upset. Maybe right then and there is not a good time to give them negative feedback. I would wait. How long do you wait though? Well, don't wait for the last minute, because they have to still be able to change their behavior and improve for the next time they teach. So certainly do it before their next class, but give them enough time to prepare. And yeah,
I guess if some people are a bit more sensitive to feedback, then it's better maybe to let them calm down.
I would say so.
After the class.
Yeah, cool. So, all right, that's timing. What we've covered today, we've had a look. What we've had a look with feedback is we had a look at timing. We had a look at suggestions for improvement. Try to be objective and also be positive. Now we're going to look at conclusions now. Next, after this, is the question and answer. So what we'd like you to do is start, if you haven't already, type your questions now. Whatever questions you have, particularly around how to train people, how to give feedback, how to help people prepare, and Rob and I will ask them. But just to conclude, so what did we look at today? We looked at different ways that people learn. People learn mostly through experience. That's 70% of the time in the workplace. How can you help them do that? Help them prepare in terms of, you can...
help them understand the material.
Yeah, help them understand the material. Have them do simulated training, give them feedback. And then, of course, we looked at how to give actual good feedback. What are the effective ways you can do so? And that's it. So that's the conclusion. That's the presentation over. But now we're going to look at the questions and answers that you might have. So the first one, Rob, could you read the first one?
So the first question we have is, what are the most difficult things trainees learn? Good question.
Okay.
For me personally, I would think grading language is one of the most difficult things. So what do I mean by grading language? I mean using the correct words for the correct level of class. So if you've got a very, very low-leveled class, obviously you need to avoid using difficult words, complicated words.
Yeah. And the speed as well.
And the speed as well, yeah.
Sure.
And then also if you've got a very high-level class, try to introduce very technical words, some more difficult ones, unusual words, informal language. So it's all about making sure that your language is for the correct level.
Yeah, true. So choose your words carefully, and then the speed of which that you say it. So obviously, when you have someone who's a basic learner, you have to speak slowly. But the thing is that the reason why that people learn this, why it's so hard for them to learn this, I'd say, is because it's not a natural way of speaking, and you have to, for someone who's a basic learner, you have to speak very slowly indeed. It's unnatural. It's not conversational, but it's the only way that they're going to be able to hear what you're saying. So you have to do it. And so you really are changing your behavior. So a TEFL trainee, they have to think about, their material, have they learned the material, what's their body language like? They've got to think of all these things. And so grading language sometimes can fall by the wayside, I'd say. Yeah. So that's definitely one thing. Another thing I'd say is error correction, actually. Error correction is something people find quite difficult. The reason why is because there are different ways that you can error correct, and you've got to kind of know what the right time is. Of
course, and you need to. There is a difference as well between an error and a mistake. So an error would be that the students have really no idea of what's wrong in what they've said, whereas a mistake, maybe they can correct themselves. Whether that's just a little change in tense or whatever that might be. But I think you need to be careful if and when you correct, depending on the type of activity as well. You don't want to interrupt a student who's having a good debate. So maybe a good technique is to write some words down that the mistakes they made, and then do a general correction at the end. But maybe if you're practicing something like the future perfect, on the spot correction is important, because you're correcting, you're testing or learning a specific tense. Sure.
And I would say a tip is, so if you remember back when we explained briefly about the PPP model of creating lessons, so when you're on the practice part of a lesson, I would correct immediately there. And when you're on the production part, so when you're allowing the student to try and produce sentences by themselves or even conversations by themselves, then I would wait probably as well. And it's always better to have them self-correct. So we talked about this earlier about self-correction with the trainee, but actually for this English student as well, it's good for them to self-correct. It's the best way for people to learn, but if they don't know it, then how can they self-correct? So you've gotten the difference. Okay. Shall I read the next question? How much should a teacher intervene if a class isn't going well for a trainee? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Another good question. Yeah, I mean, obviously we need to remember that the Spanish or the student who's learning English is the main priority.
Yeah, paying customer.
The paying customer. They're the person who you're providing the service for, so they come above everybody else. So if you could see maybe that a trainee is teaching and the class is not, or the activity is not going as they planned, you need to be prepared as the trainer to step in, or as the teacher to step in, to jump in and either help them finish that activity or take over the class if it's really going bad. But yeah, we shouldn't be nervous as teachers to jump in.
Yeah. I would also say be careful not to undermine the other teacher. So because the student should see you as a unit, as a team. Yeah. So be careful with that.
Yeah, I think if you go in together, sort of, if you speak 5 minutes before, 5-10 minutes before the class, then you can, the teacher and the trainee can work together and
set some rules.
Exactly, and work out together how they're going to approach.
How they're going to teach together, basically. Yeah. Because it could be that, you teach a lesson or an activity together, or it could be that you do them separately. So when do you sort of chip in with each other? All right. What's next? Number 3. What do you do if someone is sensitive to negative feedback? I would go back to what we were talking about in the presentation, actually. If someone's sensitive to feedback, I'll take you back to this kind of little scenario I used when someone was a bit upset with the way that the class went. Therefore, don't give them feedback right away after the class, because that's time when someone's adrenaline's moving and they're really excited, or maybe they're upset. So choose the timing correctly. What else would you say? Yeah,
I think, as I mentioned as well, you can give constructive criticism. So don't just put somebody down. You need to give reasons why you felt maybe the class didn't go as well as I thought.
Mm-hmm. We've got loads of questions, actually, so thank you very much, everyone. We're going to keep going. So what's next? What do you do if someone refuses to accept negative feedback? Okay, well, yeah, look, you sometimes get people who are maybe a bit more defensive than others, so yeah, it can be a bit of a problem. I would say try and keep it as objective as possible. So when we discussed earlier about the objectivity of how you give feedback, so our tips were try and get lots of different sources, so the more people the better. So it's not just you that's giving the feedback, it's also coming from other people. Have some data as in, write down what people have said.
Some proof
as much as you can possibly have proof. If you're not videoing the class, then you're not really going to have as much hard evidence, but you got to try and be as objective as possible, I would say.
I think also you need to bear in mind that some people take criticism a bit more personally than others, so you need to judge whether the person, you think how much criticism or negativity they can take. Some people take it a lot more personally than others.
It's true. What you want is someone who can take feedback really well. Yeah. That's always the best, isn't it? Okay. All right. We got plenty more, so let's get cracking. Rob, this one's for you, I think. When do you know that a trainee is ready to step into teaching on their own?
I think that they feel it within themselves. So I think, obviously after a few weeks of training, they're getting their confidence class by class. They're improving. Speaking with the trainee and the teacher, is a good way. I think it's something that you can kind of you feel within yourself. You think, okay, I'm actually ready now to give a class on my own. Yeah. I don't know if you would agree. Did you?
There has to be a balance between they have to feel ready but it's okay to push them a little bit. Because some people have a little bit of self-doubt and actually at times, although it may not be the best for the paying student, but really the best way to learn sometimes is being by yourself without someone watching you, because you suddenly feel a bit more free.
I think you feel a bit more like it's your class then, right? Yeah. So if you feel you're a bit more relaxed in the class almost than if you feel like you're being observed.
Sure, yeah, right, exactly. Okay. This question's from Michael Crow. What is the best paradigm for this sounds very technical already. For a teacher that likes to use a friendly, conversational, and engaging approach to their students? I think that we should, when it comes to learning English, first of all, you got to think, okay, what's the objective? Does the student want to be able to have conversations? Okay, the student wants to have conversations, then of course you should use a conversational approach to teaching. Actually, the PPP method is quite like that, because what you're doing is first of all, you're introducing the language, then you're kind of helping the student learn through Okay, I'm going to give an example, but this isn't the best example. But let's say a gap fill, right? Okay, it's not a very communicative example, but if you think, but it's a simple one for people to understand. So a gap fill exercise is where you have part of a sentence and part of it missing. So what happens is the text assists the student with the rest. Now, it's not a very conversational way to learn, but it's a typical way of people practice. So what I'd recommend is that take that kind of approach, but do it in a more verbal way.
Yeah.
And then after you've got the feeling that they understand how to construct a sentence in a certain part of the language, then try and get them to produce. So try and get them to have real conversation, debates, presentations, or just regular conversation, and about the target language, so about the thing that you've taught them.
Yeah. I think, and so long as you're always correcting and showing new words and helping them improve, then you're doing your job, right? Yeah,
indeed. So at the end of the day, the objective, if the objective is to have a conversation, then that's what your outcome should be at the end of the class. Yeah. Can they have a conversation, and can they use it relatively in a fluent way and an accurate way? Good, then they tick all the boxes. Yeah, so I hope, Michael, that answers your question. I hope that's a good paradigm for you.
Yeah. I think the next question is for you, actually, Peter. Okay. So I'll read this one to you. But when you interview a candidate, what questions tell you they can become good teachers? All right. So in case anyone doesn't know, I interview people for who want to become teachers. So they want to do a TEFL course, or they're already certified and they may want a job. So I interview lots of people. But this question is about becoming a good teacher. Okay. I'll admit it's hard to know in an interview. It's hard to know because you don't have very long to ask them. You're basing them on their responses, and people. Not that I assume people don't lie, but people certainly bring their best when it comes to an interview. So you don't always know. It's during a TEFL course is the best way to find out who's going to become a teacher. However, now you did ask the question, so I would say that they are. I would say that it's someone who shows commitment and a passion for learning and developing others. Mm. So if you really like the idea that someone else out there is improving and it's because of you, then you're going to want to teach. And if you want to teach, then with the right training, you'll become a good teacher. So that's what I'd say that is. Very good. The answer to that question. Rob, can you read the next question out? The next one is from Paul. Yeah. So what is the most important thing you look at when selecting potential TEFL students?
Is that the same question?
It is very similar, isn't it?
The most important thing when selecting potential TEFL students.
Is there something specifically that you would look for?
No, there's not something specific. No, I wouldn't say that. But I would say that, like my previous question, I think that if you're passionate about seeing other people develop, then that's the thing that you want. You can only, when it comes to interviewing, you can only ask someone and they can reply, or maybe they have other experience. Perhaps they've worked in something educational before, or they've worked in some kind of field before, and they're able to relate what they've learned. Now, during the course, during the training program, it's completely different because it's very practical. So. No. Okay, let's have a look at Michael Crow's question. So, how do you help TEFL students deal with stress during the course? Oh my goodness.
That's a good question. That's a good
question. They don't feel stress.
Well, some of them maybe do. So, no, I mean, some people can get stressed, and we've all had that feeling where you think work is piling up and presentations and preparation, etc. I think just an idea of putting it into little sections so you can focus maybe on one thing on the Monday and the next, and just try to break it up into little sections, not have to feel like you've got a million things to do and I've got to do it all before the end of the week.
I think we probably need to wrap up because we're close to finishing, but maybe we've got time for another couple of questions. So Mimi asks, what is the best way to correct the TEFL student if he or she is saying something wrong in front of the client? So we touched upon this earlier, didn't we? about intervening, right?
Yeah.
So what's the best way to correct the TEFL student? Well, I wouldn't correct the TEFL. I don't know if I'd correct the TEFL student actually. Would you? What would you do?
I mean, if they were saying something completely wrong, imagine I'll give the example of the Future Perfect again. If they were teaching the Future Perfect and they were actually teaching it wrong, then of course you would have to intervene and you would have to teach it correctly. As we said before, the student who's learning English is the priority.
Yeah. I would maybe say. Let's say that the TEFL student or the trainee has just described the present future perfect or whatever your example was incorrectly. I would say, okay, here's a better way to explain it. What about we look at this way? Because maybe this will be easier for you to learn. And you do whatever it is. You write something down or say something or give an example or whatever it might be. So what you're doing there is you're kind of, instead of saying, well, you're wrong, and undermining the trainee, because that can sometimes have a bad effect on the way that the student views the class. Yeah. What instead you're doing is you're kind of distract them and saying, actually, here's a better way, and really that's the real way that you're teaching.
Yeah.
But I would say we really, really don't want that to happen. That's quite a bit of a disaster.
Yeah,
actually.
and in theory that shouldn't happen anyway, because if the preparation has been done properly before the class, then it should in theory avoid problems like that in the classroom.
Yeah. Constance is asking, what is the best way to give criticism without being negative to a sensitive person who doesn't like to be told they're wrong? So we got a sensitive person who also doesn't like to be told they're wrong. And what's the best way to give criticism?
I guess you have to be as constructive as possible. I know we've talked about it, but you need to...
The word, criticism already sounds a bit... constructive feedback, that always sounds better. Yeah, be careful with the words you're using. And as I said before, try and be as objective as possible. And work on your timing of when you're going to give it. Try and get, it's an extreme example when someone is very, very sensitive to feedback, because usually when somebody joins a TEFL course, for example, they usually are accepting that they have to learn, and they're on a learning curve. So maybe it's important to remind them of that and just say, well, remind me why you're here. What you're here to learn. You're here to you're not already a teacher. You've got to become one. So remind them that. Yeah.
Should we do one more question?
Let's do one more. Okay.
From Edmund.
Edmund, to both. Okay. What are your favorite and least favorite things about teaching? What are they?
Favorite thing is seeing students' progress.
Yeah,
that we mentioned. Definitely. It's really, really nice actually when you can see a student is struggling with something in the class, and then by the end of the class they've got it, and you can see their face light up, and they feel good about themselves, and the job satisfaction that comes with it. Definitely, I think for me is my favorite thing. I don't know if you would agree. Or...
There is, and I would say, well, certainly. What we do, we have a good work-life balance with teaching. It's not the case all across the board. There's lots of teachers out there, primary school teachers, secondary school teachers, and they don't have a great work-life balance, unfortunately. But English teaching usually isn't so bad. But being able to impart knowledge is a nice kind of feeling. But definitely for me, the most important is watching people grow. Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's there's something really great about that. And when you're teaching the low-level students, you see it more because everything is new. They're learning how to construct sentences for the first time, and they're learning how to conjugate or whatever it might be, and you see huge steep growth.
You see it a lot faster than with someone who has next to perfect English when they're starting. So that's and I actually really enjoy for this reason teaching the lower level students.
Are there any bad things about teaching?
I was having a thing.
So don't really want to close on that note, really. But we'll get back to you on the negative side. I mean, obviously there. I would say actually that a lot of people will say that the worst part about teaching is the amount of hours that you have to spend preparing. Yeah. However, we're quite fortunate because we have all our material ready to go.
So the same with marking exams is maybe a typical thing.
Marking exams. People say parents evening, but we teach a lot of adults, so it's not so bad. So we're quite fortunate. So I would say for teachers, usually they would say it's the amount of preparation. But if you have a system like ours where you share activities and share lessons, then that takes away that burden. So, all right. Well, I think we're probably going to wrap up now. So a big thank you from us. Thank you for attending. I hope you learned a lot about how to train your TEFLs and your teacher trainees. And thank you for all the questions. And we'll hopefully see you next time.
Thank you.